Hey there, Smoke Master D coming at you with another episode of Barbecue Buyer's Guide, this time on offset smokers with scoop baffles. I expanded scoop baffle to include some of the Lone Star Grillz, which I'll explain soon. And here I have some chapter times for you. Please remember to like this video and to subscribe to the channel, and if you like, hit that little bell so you get notifications when new videos drop. And here we have maps. I like to include maps. Sometimes it's better to choose a pit builder closer to you just because of shipping costs. We'll start with the Texas builders. Jambo Pits builds out of Fort Worth, Texas. The solution offset is built a little east of there by a man named Dustin, who also actually builds the direct heat smoke slinger pits. Frank was telling me that shipping was recently between $450 to $700, in part due to a spike caused by the bridge collapse that happened. Next, we have Lone Star Grillz, a little north of Houston. Outlaw Smokers are made up in Mentone, Indiana. Lastly, I wanted to give a shout out to a builder more local to me here in North Carolina, JL Custom Smokers. They do barbecue competitions, but they also build pits. Just like the scoop baffle offset, they use themselves in competitions, which you see here. I'm not officially covering them because they don't have a website or set prices, but if you want to get in touch with them, you can find them on Facebook. And now let's talk about scoop baffle offsets and what that means. The main feature of the scoop baffle offset is, of course, the baffle, which directs heat and smoke directly to the top of the cooking chamber. And here, you see the direction of that airflow, how as it travels across the top of the chamber, some of that heat bleeds through the top, and as that happens, some of the air cools, falling down to the grate below and creating fairly even temperatures across the entirety of the grate. Now, here I'm going to explain the differences in types of scoop baffles. One thing you'll frequently notice about these offsets is that the firebox will ride higher in relationship to the main chamber than what you'd normally see on other kinds of offset smokers. And that's because they're not trying to create diagonal airflow across the chamber from bottom to top. They're actually trying to do the opposite. According to Jamie Geer, the founder and operator of Jambo Pits, Jamie, is the inventor of the scoop baffle. That's why I put his first. His smokers, and the smokers of the builders that have copied his smokers, have become incredibly popular in the competition barbecue scene, which is why their most basic versions come with a good many features on them that would be considered upgrades on other pits, like a stainless steel front shelf. And that makes them fairly expensive. These smokers come with an insulated firebox, which means the wood will burn extremely efficiently, and that the heat coming up off that angled baffle will be pretty intense. The main chamber, however, for these smokers are generally made with slightly thinner 3/16 inch steel. Okay, that's thinner than the 1/4 inch steel of many other smokers, and what is usually considered the gold standard of metal thickness for offset smokers. And that 3/16 inch steel being thinner will aid the bleeding of heat off the top and allowing that cooled smoke and air to swirl down. In fact, I don't think that the 3/16 inch metal is any sort of money saver. Most of these pits, like I said, are top of the line competition pits. I think the thinner metal is absolutely necessary to the design. Imagine if you had an insulated top instead of on the firebox on that main chamber, and you were trying to use this model that's based on air cooling as it goes across the top of the chamber. If that heat can't escape, no air and smoke cools, and it never makes it down to the grate. And instead of having even temps all the way across, you have a larger cool zone right next to the firebox and a hotter zone next to the exhaust where that heat is actually forced to come down by, the suction. So I do think that the 3/16 inch steel is part of the design. Now, for the Lone Star Grillz, they took the scoop and they made it almost an entire wall. And you can see that on 2 of their smokers. And as far as I know, it is only 2 smokers. I don't think that they have any other smokers with this scoop baffle. The heated air and smoke goes straight up and over the wall to the top grate that's going to have serious hot spots right there, and then a main grate below with pretty even temperatures across. Now, one thing to consider about these first 2 forms of scoop baffle offset smoker is the possibility of a dead spot or cool spot. You'll notice on the pictures of the Jambo baffle that I found examples of baffles that come above the grate and ones that don't. I'm not exactly sure what is standard for them now. I think it is the one that doesn't come up all the way above the grate. But the idea is that the hot air going up and then coming back down will miss that area right next to the baffle. You know, the heat goes up, it's going to go straight up, and it's going to create a dead spot sort of right there. And the other thing about it, though, is that it may not be a temperature dead spot. The temperature won't be that far off from the rest of the grate. Now, why is that, you would wonder? And the likely answer is radiant heat coming off of the baffle itself, which will cover sort of that area with enough heat and temperature to make it, considerable to the rest of the grate. Now, there might be some debate on how much this dynamic is actually occurring and exactly how important it is or isn't. The solution baffle, however, which was created by Jeremy Yoder and Frank Cox, seems to have fixed this problem to a large extent by putting holes in the baffle and making it adjustable. So you can be certain that convection will still happen next to that plate because of the air going through the smoker. It's still going to touch your meat there. It may be slightly more bottom-up cooking than top-down by a little bit right there. That's the only thing that I would think might be something. Now, I should mention also that the LSG's 20-inch smokers, as opposed to the Texas Edition, does recirculate some of that smoke back around to the area right next to their firebox, which is part of what they call their cross-flow design. I don't think that, however, is necessarily true for the Texas Edition. It would be interesting for someone to taste test whether food cooked right next to the firebox on that smoker had a less smoky flavor as a result. Just an idea. But those are the different kinds of scoop baffles. And now we're going to go through features from these smoker builders who offer the cheapest options in order to those with the most expensive. Starting with those 20-inch diameter smokers from Lone Star Grillz. So it's going to be $21.95 for the 20 by 36 and $23.95 for the 20 by 42. Then we have the more expensive Texas Edition with the full smoke collector there. And the 40-inch goes for $31.95 and the 48-inch for $35.90. All right, and we're going to start our deep dive into the 20-inch models here. The firebox is 1/4-inch steel, and the chamber is going to be 3/16, just like I talked about with the Jambo Pits. All right, and you have that fold down shelf and the slide out grates, both things that a lot of people like on their pits. Another thing Lone Star Grillz is known for is allowing their smokers to have water in the bottom of them, which helps keep even temperatures in the chamber. It's also a heat sink, so it keeps the temperatures, more even when you open the lid and close it again. It gets back to temp quicker. It keeps a more humid environment in the chamber. So you can see what I marked as the water fill line is there where the bottom of the exhaust hole is. So, all that heat and smoke is going all the way to the bottom of the chamber right above the water. Lastly, of course, we have the cubic firebox, which allows a much better grilling situation than the cowboy firebox is seen on cylindrical fireboxes. And this is because the various slide positions allow you to bring the coals up higher to the grate if you want, allows you to do a lot more with sliding things out, like the ash pan, that fire grate, the cooking grate. the griddle, and yeah, there's also a griddle top, which you see there, which makes the grill really good for reverse searing some steaks, making smash burgers. Even though I generally prefer a round firebox to hold a good coal bed, there's a lot of nice things about this firebox setup. And if I didn't have a round firebox, this is the kind of firebox with this sort of versatility that I would want in that trade off. And here we have the Texas Edition. And it has a smoke collector that spans the entire diameter of the chamber, so that's nice. Some people have said that having a smoke collector at grate level will pull the smoke and heat over the meat more evenly. Not entirely sure if this is what actually happens or is true, but one thing I am pretty certain about is that it does keep smoke and heat from bouncing back right there at that wall of the chamber, which will usually cause a little bit of a hot spot at that end of the grate unless you do have that opening for it to go in. So that is, I believe, an issue. Now, as you see, it comes with a top half rack as well as a fire management basket. This pit is 1/4 inch in construction all the way through. This pit has a raw finish, which means you will be adding oil of some kind to the outside of the pit and baking it on yourself. Now, here we have the upgrade options. I wanted to show you that you can get a second half rack for the Texas Edition smoker for $45. When I do the charts for these smokers, though, I won't be including that extra half rack, so keep that in mind. That would change some things for its lineup in some of those charts. Pro port for $25, stainless steel front shelf for an extra $295, sunbrella cover for $399 for the 20-inch models, and then $489 for the Texas Edition. So it's because it's larger. There is a gas assist you can get, so it gets your fire going for you at the beginning of the cook for $149.95. You can upgrade from 5-inch wheels to 8-inch wheels for $175, or the off-road package, with those nice tires and cart sort of system for $895. A fire basket, if you want it for the 20-inch models, is $89.95. The ash pan is $115. I would definitely get the ash pan. I love it. I love a good ash pan. And the grill for the main chamber is $95 if you want to grill in there. I suppose that would be more for the Texas Edition, or if you wanted to do that in the 20-inch and have more than one grill going, more grill space, maybe that could work out too. And here we have the solution offset, which is the product of 3 different men sort of coming together. First, we have Jeremy Yoder from Mad Scientist Barbecue YouTube channel. He got together with Frank Cox from SmokerBuilder.com. And you may have seen a video come out from Jeremy almost a year ago now, in which he gave away a 1,000-gallon pit that featured a scoop baffle. Well, that pit was actually built from plans from SmokerBuilder.com, which Frank Cox runs. And he sells plans for building all sorts of barbecue pits through that website, including ones with scoop baffles. Just lately, he has included plans for baffles that are the solution baffle. So if you wanted to build a pit with one of those, I believe that is now available. So Jeremy and Frank got the last member of the team, Dustin, from Smoke Slinger, and they started producing these solution offset smokers to sell for $2,500. Right now, they have a public Patreon page from which you can get information to purchase this smoker, but soon they will be launching a website also, so look out for that. Also, please forgive this picture here. Promise that this smoker does have an exhaust damper, even if you can't see it here. When they launch the website, hopefully they'll put out a better full shot of the smoker. And there's the solution baffle again with its holes. The smoke collector doesn't span the entire grate, which is something that I would nitpick, but it's probably not a particularly significant problem. Besides the Texas Edition, it actually has the biggest collector out of all the scoop baffle offsets we're looking at today. For some reason, they're very particular about having their flanging outside of the smoker rather than inside. And flanging, if you didn't know, is that strip of metal that sort of covers the gap of a door to keep the heat and smoke in. A fairly standard drain and probe port is there. The intake damper is just the door with a notch system, as you see. There's no grill in the firebox. It also comes raw, and you have to oil it down and season it to protect the metal, just like the Texas Edition. The solution offset is a basic no-frills smoker that gets that one job of smoking meat done, and I think it will do a pretty good job at that. And now for the Jambo Backyard Pit. It costs $4,100. Say it costs rather than it starts at because there are no upgrades. It's one of those situations in which the builder believes the pit is already as good as it can be. We saw that with my last episode with Harper BBQ Pits out in California. You'll decide whether this claim for this pit is true or not, especially when we look at all the upgrades for the Outlaw Smokers pit. So here we see some of the features. The pit now comes with the wheels and tires that you see on the right. I do have a picture of the previous setup, but they did away with that a few years ago, according to Mr. Deere, the owner. The pit has a very small collector, and I wonder if the bounce back air on that end actually helps keep the temps even on that side instead of creating a hot spot. You know, if it's balanced just right, maybe that could work out. And one other special thing about this pit is that it has no intake damper. There's a windshield and an opening for the air to come across those 4 holes you see spread across the door, but that's it. The firebox is insulated, and it comes with an expanded metal grate that you can just barely see in that top picture. And on that grate, you build your fire, and the grate, helps keep air around the entirety of the coals and stuff to keep them burning. Another thing to notice is that the main chamber has double doors, which will make it easier to lift them, cut down on heat loss when you lift them too. There is an exhaust damper, which is that circle of metal in the stack which you can swivel up to allow the hot air and smoke to escape that stack. And here is a screen capture from a YouTube video by a gentleman named Tuffy Stone instructing people on fire management with his double Jambo pit. I brightened the back end of that firebox, and you can clearly read the name Jambo Pits there. Again, these scoop baffle smokers have been almost exclusively used by people on the competition circuit like Tuffy Stone until Lone Star Grillz and now the solution offset started making them more accessible to the regular backyard cook. There were backyard, models before those, but it's really become more and more popular, and I think the solution offset smoker is going to make them more popular still. Another note is that even though Jambo doesn't upgrade their patio model, they will do quite a lot if you want a custom pit like Tuffy's there. So that is one thing to consider. And now moving on, here we have the Outlaw Patio Smoker, or the front load patio cart basic model for $4,500. On that description below, you see everything that comes standard: the grates, the fire basket, the thermometer, the chassis, I think that's how you say that, with 8-inch wheels as seen there. Now let's take a closer look. First, let's determine what they mean by front load. That means on the same side as you have your main chamber door. So you see that you load the wood into your firebox from that side instead of what I call the back and what they call the side, which is how most offset smokers are oriented. When you're in a competition atmosphere or have this smoker up on a trailer, not needing extra space on that side that I call the back, of the smoker could be helpful. You may be sort of in cramped space. Now, this smoker has a single door. It also has a handle for its cart, which you can stick to the smoke collector with a magnet when you're not using it. I like that. Again, the stainless steel shelf comes standard. On the bottom, instead of having a wood grate, they have a wood container with sidewalls. Again, if you're going to a competition, you have to bring your wood with you. So it makes a lot of sense for people doing that. This smoker has a similar exhaust damper as the Jambo, but with a stylish CNC cut handle. It does have an intake damper. The picture on the bottom left is from another model, which is not front load, that somewhat shows the cavity the air comes in through. Had a really difficult time trying to see pictures of this system. Again, the idea is to help reduce wind influence. The air comes in from the bottom of the smoker up through that cavity and out right at wood level in the basket. The basket itself is designed with room for ash to fall through and with a removable ash catching tray. Again, an insulated firebox. And here we have many upgrades for their patio model. The heavy rod grates are $169. They have a microwave shelf. I guess that means you can just heat up your food really quickly if you put it on that shelf. And, it's at the top of the chamber where all that heat is, and that's $103.50. Another popular option is the stainless steel firebox cap, so you can put things up there without compromising the finish below. It's $195. If you want upgraded wheels or tires, they have a link for a list you can choose from. And you tell them what you want, and the manufacturer sends them the tires and the wheels to add to your pit. There's a winch assembly, helpful for getting your pit up into that trailer as you haul it around to various competitions. That's $405. There's a cover for $320. They have a hot box pizza oven for $195. That sounds like fun. If you want your stack to be chrome, that's an extra $395. And lastly, $60 for an extra thermometer if you want one of those. And now we're moving on to our charts section. Here we have all these offset smokers visually depicting the differences in base price. One thing to remember, though, is that some of these base prices include a lot more things. Take the Jambo, for instance, which comes standard with double doors, tire, wheels, a stainless steel shelf, and a painted finish. When you add up the cost for those things and then look at its nearest competitor, the 48-inch LSG Texas Edition, you have to ask whether you might be getting a better deal with one rather than the other. And really, it depends on what you want. And here, in the next slide, we have the inches squared. One thing I want to note here is that the three offsets with chamber sizes of 24 by 40, Solution, Texas Edition 40, and the Outlaw Patio, may actually have the same grate space. Some people don't calculate the same way or account for metal thickness cutting into the grate space or other things. So I just wanted to say that that 920 and 960 may actually be the same number. I'm not sure. Anyway, I put both the main grate and then both grates together if a second level grate exists. Remember, I didn't include the second half grate for the Texas Edition. Now, one thing I'd like to mention here is that many people, including Jeremy Yoder, who mentioned this in a video on that Patreon page where they're selling the Solution Smoker from, about bottom grates versus second level grates. A lot of people like bottom grates and not second level. The basic idea is that the second level grates aren't worthwhile. Apparently, Jamie Gear from Jambo Pits agrees because he also doesn't offer one, nor the makers of the Outlaw Patio. They do have that microwave shelf, though. The second level shelf won't cook the same as the bottom one. These pits are designed to have the really hot heat all up there, so it's really going to be very different from one level to the other. I have a second level grate. I think I've used it once or twice in the 3 years I've had my offset. It's one of those things that you get thinking, hey, I'm really going to love this thing. I want that extra space. But in practicality, for me at least, and for many people I know, it just hasn't been worth the money. Both great numbers look impressive, but they may not be quite as impressive as you might think just because of that. All right. And here we have the dollar per inches squared numbers. For the single main grate, the solution offset comes out the best at $2.72 per square inch. And this is where you have to ask yourself how much you value that second level grate, because the lowest number on here with the two grates together is $1.87 per square inch with the LSG 20x42. And on these numbers, again, you have to figure in what comes standard, like the stainless shelves, the off-road wheels for the two premium offsets. Now, I've decided not to do anything with weight. We've talked about metal thickness already, and since having thinner metal in some instances could be good for this kind of offset, didn't really seem worthwhile to have those numbers or that conversation. Which now brings me to my own thoughts, which I'm going to share with you. To some extent, I think this is about what you want. I like the 20-inch Lone Star Grillz offsets. The main chamber shape has really become associated with their pellet grills these days, but they started it with these offset smokers. If you want to grill in the firebox or have a griddle as well as a smoker to smoke the food, if you don't want to do more than a couple of briskets in one cook, these could be a really good option. The one thing I don't care for is that I prefer a round bottom for a firebox to build a good coal bed and keep that coal bed going a little bit more easily. That's not really how these smokers are built, except for the solution offset. For those 20-inch LSG smokers, I suppose that you could, put your fire on the bottom of their firebox and make that work. So there's that. These 20-inch offsets, though, from LSG are the most versatile of the group. More than that, they perhaps make the best showing of versatility in an offset smoker with that firebox configuration. Now, it's easy enough to get a Weber kettle alongside and throw a griddle on its grates, but as far as having it all in one, the 20-inch offsets do it fairly well. Now, moving on, I'm not a huge fan of the Texas Edition, in part because you have that square firebox without any of the benefits of the grill and griddle, the 20-inch models, and partly because I prefer the round. It's about the same size as the solution offset, same metal thickness. You have to add the finish yourself like the solution, but the solution baffle just seems better all around than the whole wall scoop baffle. As for the solution offset, I think it has a lot of value. I think it will do just what it claims it can do, and customers who purchase it are going to be generally happy with their purchase. I like that it's adjustable with that solution baffle, so that if you really wanted to do two-zone cooking in there, you could move the baffle over and create a hot zone and a cool zone. Or if you want the even temperatures, you could just move the baffle back, and it's probably where you're going to keep it most of the time, but you can do that too. I like that option. I like that versatility. I like that it's a no-frills smoker. If there was one thing I would add, it would add a full-down shelf at the door of the main chamber. I like shelves. They make things a whole lot easier. Of course, you could put a little table there if you wanted to, but that is what I would want included. Then maybe I'd say, wow, this thing's all I could want. Of course, there are plenty of people who would want more than I do. And they do want those frills. And out of the Jambo and Outlaw smokers who do have some of those things, I'd like Jambo just a little bit better, probably because it is a little bit less frills smoker. I like the stainless steel front shelves. I like the mobility of these smokers, with those wheels and tires. I see somebody doing 12 or more competitions in a year, maybe less than that, maybe 2 or 3 would want those smokers to haul around and cook on. I can see that for them. I, however, would save my money and get either the Solution or one of the 20-inch LSGs instead. And if it were between those, I would get the Solution offset and just get other cookers to do my grilling and griddling on. Maybe a frying pan. Jeremy, on his public video, on his Patreon page that he, has for this smoker, has sold me on the idea that a pit should just do one thing really well. And I think that's what the Solution offset does. So that would be the one, if I were looking to buy with my limited resources, I think I would try to get. Now, those are my thoughts. You probably have your own thoughts, so why don't you go ahead and put those down in the comment section below. And if you have any of these smokers, please put a review in the comment section too. In the near future, I plan to analyze the Solution offset smoker versus workhorse pits. So hopefully that'll be fun. Thank you for watching, and as always, go get your smoke on, y'all.